My son showed me a 7-second video on a Thursday night, and I stood there watching my entire future collapse in slow motion. My fiancée Rachel was at her bachelorette party, wearing the white dress she had posted on Instagram 3 hours earlier with the caption, "Last night of freedom with my girls." She wasn't with her girls. She was in a corner booth, curled up in her ex-husband's lap, the man she swore she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, kissing him the way people kiss when they had been doing it for a long time and planned to keep doing it. And when someone off-camera shouted that it was her last free night, Rachel pulled back from the kiss and smiled. Not guilty, not startled, just smiled. My son Dylan had been working the catering shift at that venue. He watched it happen live. He recorded it so I would believe him. Owen Hayes had built his life carefully, piece by deliberate piece, the way a man does when he has already watched everything crumble once before. At 44, he was steady, measured, and disciplined, an IT project manager in Austin, Texas, who had learned, through pain, that the difference between surviving and being destroyed often comes down to preparation. He had a 16-year-old son named Dylan from his first marriage, a kid who carried his mother's stubbornness and his father's uncanny ability to spot patterns hiding in chaos. Owen had no idea that Thursday night that inherited gift would be the very thing that saved him. It was around 9:30 in the evening when his phone buzzed on his office desk. A text from Dylan, short and urgent. "Dad, we need to talk now." Owen knew his son well enough to know he didn't scare easily, so he went downstairs immediately and found Dylan in the kitchen, pale-faced and rigid, his laptop open on the counter like something dangerous was sitting inside it. Dylan didn't say a word. He just turned the screen toward his father and let the video speak for itself. The footage was shaky, shot in a dim club strobed with colored lights, loud music pulsing in the background. Owen recognized the setting within seconds. It was the bachelorette party. His fiancée Rachel had posted a photo just 3 hours earlier on Instagram wearing a white satin dress captioned, "Last night of freedom with my girls." But she wasn't with her girls. The camera panned across the room and found her tucked into a corner booth, curled up in a man's lap with a comfort and familiarity that told a longer story than she had ever admitted. His hands slid along her waist. Her fingers traced his jawline with the ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. And then she kissed him. Not the careless, sloppy kiss of someone too drunk to think straight, but a deliberate, intimate kiss that belonged to people with history. Dylan's quiet instruction came. Keep watching. When the camera zoomed in and Owen saw the man's face clearly, his stomach dropped. Trevor Langley, Rachel's ex-husband, Emma's father. The man Rachel had sworn on multiple occasions she hadn't spoken to in over 3 years. Someone off camera shouted above the music, "It's her last free night, let her enjoy it." And Rachel pulled back from the kiss and smiled. Not embarrassed, not startled, not guilty. Just smiled, as though she were exactly where she wanted to be. Owen didn't break down. He didn't rage. He stood very still and felt something shift inside him, not shattering, but crystallizing. He walked to his office, opened the filing cabinet, and retrieved a folder he had hoped he would never need. The label read, "Contingency Plan, Langley." Dylan followed him in, pale and apologetic, explaining that he had been working a catering shift at the venue that night, that he had seen it happen in real time, that he could not stay silent. Owen looked at his son, this young man who had just been forced to grow up a little faster because the woman about to become his stepmother couldn't keep her hands off her ex-husband, and told him simply, "You did the right thing." Then he picked up his phone and texted his attorney. The message was brief, and the reply was immediate. Something had been set into motion that could not be undone. Karma, Owen believed, just needed the right documentation to do its job. Owen had not always been this prepared. There was a time, not so long ago, when he had been the kind of man who trusted completely, loved openly, and never once thought to protect himself from the person sharing his bed. That version of Owen Hayes was dismantled in a single afternoon when he came home early from a business trip and found his first wife, Michelle, in their bedroom with her tennis instructor. No warning, no suspicion, just the ordinary cruelty of a Tuesday afternoon that split his life into before and after. The divorce that followed lasted 18 months and cost him $70,000 in legal fees. He walked away with his clothes, a mountain of debt, and the hollow feeling of a man who had given everything to someone who had been quietly taking him apart. The house was gone. The savings were gutted. His sense of judgment, the thing he had always trusted most about himself, felt broken beyond repair. Recovery didn't happen overnight. Owen spent the better part of a year in therapy with Dr. Patricia Coleman, a specialist in helping people rebuild after infidelity. She was direct, practical, and she said something during one of their early sessions that lodged itself permanently into the back of his mind. "Owen, you cannot control whether someone betrays you, but you can control how prepared you are when they do." He turned those words over for weeks. They weren't cynical. They weren't the words of a man who had given up on love. They were the words of someone who understood that hope and caution were not opposites, that you could open your heart while still keeping your eyes open. He began to think differently about vulnerability, about what it meant to be smart rather than simply trusting. It was around this time that he reconnected with Stephen Garrett, an old college friend who had become one of the sharpest family law attorneys in Austin. They ran into each other at a networking event, exchanged numbers, and ended up talking for 3 hours over drinks. Owen told him everything: Michelle, the divorce, the losses, the feeling of having been completely exposed. Stephen listened without judgment. Then he said something simple and practical. "Let me help you build a safety net, not because you're cynical, but because you're smart." Over the weeks that followed, they worked together carefully, crafting a prenuptial agreement that was less about distrust and more about clarity. Every line was deliberate. Every clause was chosen to reflect not pessimism, but realism. The centerpiece was Clause 7.4b, Stephen's idea, though Owen refined every word of it. It stated plainly that if documented infidelity occurred before the marriage certificate was filed, all jointly held assets would default to the person who provided the original capital, and any rights to shared ownership would be nullified within 72 hours of a confirmed breach. It was clean, legal, and precise. Owen filed it away in a folder labeled Contingency Plan and prayed he would never need to open it again. He had done the hard work of rebuilding once. He wasn't willing to go through that destruction a second time without something standing between him and the fire. That folder, that clause, and that friendship with Stephen Garrett were the 3 things that would ultimately save him from Rachel Langley. Owen met Rachel 2 years before the Bachelorette party video shattered everything he thought he knew about her. He wasn't looking for a relationship when they crossed paths at a corporate mixer. He was there to represent his firm, shake hands, and leave early. But Rachel had a way of commanding a room without seeming to try. She was a marketing director at a pharmaceutical company, polished and independent, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from a woman who has built her own life and knows its value. She had her own money, her own apartment, her own plans. She was nothing like the version of love he had been burned by before. For the first time since Michelle, Owen let himself consider the possibility that this time might be different. They dated for 8 months before the word marriage entered the conversation. Owen was careful, patient, deliberately slow. He watched how Rachel handled stress, how she treated service workers, how she talked about her ex-husband Trevor in passing, always with the same calm, rehearsed distance that suggested the chapter was closed. She mentioned him only in the context of their daughter Emma, and always with the air of someone who had long since moved on. Owen had no reason to question it. He watched, he listened, and eventually he allowed himself to believe. When he finally proposed, it felt like the right decision, made by a man who had taken his time and used his head as much as his heart. But then came the prenup. Owen brought it to Rachel's kitchen table one evening while wedding magazines were spread across every surface. He slid the folder across to her and told her to take her time, to have her own attorney review it if she wanted. He was honest about why it existed, not because he doubted her specifically, but because he had been here before and had learned, at tremendous cost, that love alone was not a legal strategy. Rachel flipped through the pages quietly. When she reached Clause 7.4b and read the words infidelity termination aloud,
She paused. She looked at him and asked whether he really thought she would cheat. He told her he hadn't thought Michelle would either. That was the only answer he had, and it was the truest one. Rachel set the papers down, picked up a pen, and signed every page. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't ask for a week to think it over. She didn't push back on the language or request a single amendment. At the time, Owen read that as a sign of honesty, the behavior of a woman with nothing to hide. He felt something loosen inside him, a weight he hadn't fully realized he was still carrying. He thought the signing meant she understood him, that she respected the wound behind the request. He thought it meant she was different. What he didn't yet know, and wouldn't know until a private investigator slid a folder across a coffee shop table many months later, was that Rachel had signed so easily because she never believed she would get caught. The prenup, to her, was just a piece of paper standing between her and a plan she was already running.
Rachel came home at 6:15 in the morning. Owen heard the key in the lock before he saw her. The unsteady footsteps in the hallway, the soft curse when she bumped into the console table in the dark. He was already sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched, watching the first light of morning come through the window. He had been there for hours, still and quiet, going over documents, going over the video in his mind, going over every conversation he could remember having with her about Trevor. He had built his case the way he built everything, methodically, without letting emotion collapse the structure. She appeared in the doorway, still wearing the white dress from her Instagram post, now wrinkled and wine-stained. Her makeup had streaked down her cheeks. She was carrying her heels in one hand and a half-empty champagne bottle in the other. When she saw him sitting there in the kitchen light, she smiled. Not a guilty smile, not a cautious smile. Just the tired, uncomplicated smile of a woman who had a great night and expected a quiet Sunday morning. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice thick with alcohol. "You're up early." Owen didn't respond. He watched her set the champagne bottle on the counter and walk toward the coffee maker, chatting about Melissa trying karaoke, about how wild the girls had gotten, filling the silence the way people do when they don't yet know the silence is about them. He said 2 words, "Sit down." Something in his tone stopped her. She pulled out a chair across from him and sat, still holding her shoes, her expression shifting from loose and easy to something guarded. He opened his laptop and turned it toward her. The video was already cued to the right moment. Rachel and Trevor in the booth, his hands on her waist, her fingers tracing his jaw, the kiss that lasted long enough to mean everything. Rachel's face went white. The shoes dropped from her hands and clattered on the floor. She asked where he had gotten it, and he told her calmly. Dylan had been working the catering shift at the venue. He had seen it happen live and recorded it so his father would have proof. She reached for the laptop. He closed it before she could touch it. The explanation she offered was the one people always reach for. Trevor had shown up uninvited, she was drunk, it was stupid, it didn't mean anything. Owen stood up slowly, walked to the counter, and retrieved the folder he had placed there the night before. He set it in front of her and told her to open it to clause 7.4b, the one she had signed 6 months ago. He watched the exact moment understanding hit her face. The color drained completely. She said no, said they were 11 days from the wedding, said people were flying in, said he couldn't do this over one mistake. He told her he wasn't canceling anything. The wedding was simply off. And by 8 o'clock that morning, when Stephen arrived with a notary, so was her name on the deed to the house. Stephen Garrett arrived at exactly 8 o'clock with his briefcase in one hand and a licensed notary named Patricia Wells at his side. She was a woman in a gray suit who carried a leather portfolio and wore the expression of someone who had witnessed this particular kind of mourning more times than she could count. The kind where a life gets legally reorganized before breakfast. Owen let them in through the front door and led them to the dining room table. The scattered papers from Rachel's earlier outburst still covered the kitchen floor. The overturned chair hadn't been righted. The champagne bottle still sat on the counter like a relic from a celebration that now felt obscene. Rachel was upstairs. Owen could hear her moving through the rooms. Drawers pulled open, things dropped, the particular sound of someone packing in anger and disbelief. Dylan had already left for school, pausing at the door long enough to hug his father and say, "You've got this, Dad," with a quiet certainty that Owen would carry with him for the rest of the day. Patricia arranged her materials on the table with professional calm. Stamps, seal, witness forms, everything required to make the morning legally permanent. Stephen asked if Rachel had threatened legal action yet. Owen said not yet, but he expected it was coming. Stephen nodded and said nothing more. Rachel came down the stairs slowly, gripping the railing. She had changed into jeans and a sweatshirt, scrubbed off her makeup. She looked younger without it, more vulnerable, more like someone who had just had the ground disappear beneath her feet. For a fraction of a second, something moved in Owen's chest. Then he remembered the smile on her face in the video, and the feeling was gone. Stephen addressed her formally, explaining that they were present to execute the terms of the prenuptial agreement she had signed on February 14th. He asked whether she understood what that meant. She told him bitterly that she understood he was stealing her house. Stephen corrected her without emotion. It had never been her house. The down payment was 100% Owen's. She had signed a contingent ownership agreement during escrow stating that her interest in the property was conditional upon the marriage proceeding. The marriage was not proceeding. Her interest was void. Rachel looked at Owen and tried once more. Said she would go to counseling, said she would do whatever he wanted, said they could still fix this. He told her quietly to sign the papers. Patricia slid the first document across the table, a voluntary release of property interest, acknowledging the prenuptial terms and relinquishing any claim to the house at 847 Ridgewater Lane. Rachel didn't move. Stephen told her plainly that refusal meant court, that the video evidence would enter the record, and that she would lose anyway, only slower and at a cost she couldn't afford. He knew her savings account balance. She couldn't fight this. She could only choose how much it cost her. She grabbed the pen and signed so hard the paper tore slightly. Patricia witnessed it, stamped it, and sealed it, legal and binding. A second document followed, confirmation that all wedding expenses paid by Owen were non-recoverable. She signed that one too, tears finally falling. When Patricia closed her portfolio and nodded to Stephen, the transaction was complete. The house was Owen's. The wedding was history. Karma had arrived exactly on schedule. Owen spent Saturday morning on the phone. There were vendors to call, plans to dismantle, and a guest list full of people who had already booked flights and made arrangements for a wedding that was no longer happening. He started with Jessica, the coordinator at Briar Hill Gardens, who answered the phone in her bright professional voice, expecting a final head count. Instead, she got a cancellation, and then, before she could fully process that, she got a conversion. Owen told her he wanted to keep the venue booking for the same date and time. He wanted to keep the catering, keep the flowers, keep the string lights and the long tables with white linens. He just wanted to remove the altar, fold away the ceremony chairs, and skip straight to dinner. Jessica paused for a long moment, then shifted smoothly into efficiency. It could be done. It would be done. The group text he sent next was simple and direct. He told the people who mattered, his parents, his brother Matt, close friends, a few college buddies, that the wedding was off, that he and Rachel had separated, and that dinner at Briar Hill Gardens was still happening on the 14th. If they still wanted to come, he would explain everything there. His phone rang almost instantly. His mother was first. Owen told her plainly. Rachel had cheated at her bachelorette party. Dylan had caught it on video. He had activated the prenup clause, and Rachel was moving out. His mother was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if he was okay. He told her he was better than fine. He was protected this time. She told him she would be there on the 14th and that she was bringing Aunt Linda, who had always said there was something off about Rachel. The call he had dreaded most was to Bob Pewitt, Rachel's father, a man who had treated Owen like the son he never had from the very beginning. Owen dialed and told him everything, straight, no softening. Bob went quiet for so long that Owen thought the line had dropped. Then he said one thing. Trevor was there. Owen confirmed it. Bob exhaled slowly, and then, in a moment that caught Owen completely off guard, he asked if there was anything he could do to help.
No defense of his daughter, no anger redirected at Owen, just a tired, dignified man acknowledging that his child had done something wrong and that he was not going to pretend otherwise. He said he had raised Rachel better than this. He said if she had done what Owen was describing, she had brought it on herself. He said he would be at the dinner because someone needed to represent the family with integrity. Dylan texted that evening to ask how the calls had gone. Owen told him better than expected and mentioned that his grandfather was coming to dinner. Dylan's reply came back fast. "Cool. Can I bring a date?" Owen smiled for the first time in 2 days. He typed back, yes. It was a small thing, a teenager wanting to bring a girl to a dinner that used to be a wedding, but it felt like the first breath of something normal returning. The 14th would not be the day he had originally planned for, but sitting in his quiet house with the paperwork filed and the future clearing slowly ahead of him, Owen began to understand that it might turn out to be something better. Rachel's mother arrived on Sunday afternoon, like a storm that had been building for days. Owen was in the garage organizing tools when the doorbell rang, and then kept ringing, punctuated by fists pounding on the front door with a fury that suggested the woman on the other side had rehearsed this moment the entire drive over. Linda Pewitt was Rachel's mother in the truest sense, loud where Rachel was smooth, explosive where Rachel was calculated. She pushed past Owen the moment he opened the door, demanding to know where her daughter was, calling the whole situation financial abuse before she had even taken off her coat. Owen told her calmly that Rachel was upstairs packing and had until 6 o'clock to be out. Linda called it manipulation. She called it legal tricks. She used the phrase financial abuse with the confidence of someone who had learned it recently and was trying it on for size. Owen didn't argue. He pulled out his phone, opened the video, and held it up so she could see her daughter kissing Trevor Langley in that booth, his hands sliding down her dress, Rachel's fingers in his hair, the smile that followed. Linda watched for 3 seconds before turning away and telling him to turn it off. He told her plainly that was her daughter cheating on him with her ex-husband at her own bachelorette party the night before their wedding. He asked if she still thought he was the bad guy. Rachel appeared at the top of the stairs with 2 suitcases, asking her mother what she was doing there. Linda said she had come to get her, that she didn't have to stay and be abused. Owen pointed out, without raising his voice, that he had given Rachel 48 hours to collect her things in peace, that he could have changed the locks Friday night and put everything on the lawn. He had shown her more courtesy than she had shown him. They went back and forth, Linda escalating, Owen holding steady, until Linda said the 4 words that stopped the room cold. "Tell him about the money." Rachel's face went pale. She tried to stop her mother, but the damage was already done. Owen looked at Rachel and asked what money. She wouldn't meet his eyes when she told him. After the prenup papers were signed on Friday morning, before Owen could freeze their joint accounts, Rachel had gone to the bank and withdrawn $43,000. She said she was scared. She said she didn't know where she was going to live. She said she had contributed to that account too and had every right to it. Owen stood very still while she spoke, and when she finished, he dialed Stephen's number. He explained the situation in front of both of them. Rachel had withdrawn $43,000 from their joint account after the prenup breach was confirmed. He wanted it back, plus damages for fraudulent transfer. Stephen said he could file the next morning. Owen said to do it. Rachel started crying. Linda grabbed her arm and told her they were leaving, told Owen he could have his precious house, told him Rachel was better off without him. Owen opened the front door and stood beside it. He gave them 10 minutes. When they drove away, he called the locksmith.
The lawsuit moved faster than anyone expected. Stephen filed the emergency motion Monday morning, and by Wednesday they were standing in Judge Raymond's courtroom. Rachel arrived with a young public defender who looked overwhelmed before the first document was even laid on the table. Stephen presented everything cleanly: bank records, the signed prenup, the property release Rachel had signed Friday morning, and the withdrawal timestamp showing she had pulled the money from the account just 3 hours after signing. Judge Raymond reviewed it all in silence, then looked directly at Rachel and asked whether she had or had not withdrawn $43,000 from a joint account after signing an agreement that froze shared assets. Her lawyer began to speak. The judge held up one hand and said he had asked Ms. Langley. Rachel stood, her hands trembling,
and said yes. The judge told her she had thought wrong about her right to do so. Motion granted. Full repayment within 10 business days, plus $6,500 in legal fees. Failure meant automatic wage garnishment. That evening, a call came from a number Owen almost didn't answer. It was Emma, Rachel's 13-year-old daughter, the girl he had spent 2 years planning to be a stepfather to. Her voice was small and careful, like someone walking on ice. She asked why he was being so mean to her mom. He sat down and tried to find words that were honest without being cruel. He told her he wasn't trying to be mean, that her mom had made choices that hurt him, and that he was protecting himself. Emma said he was trying to ruin her mother's life, that Rachel was crying all the time, that she was scared about losing her job because of the garnishment. Owen told her gently but clearly that what had happened was the consequence of her mother's choices, not his actions. Emma said something that hit harder than anything else in the entire ordeal. She said Dylan had shown her the video, that she hadn't known her mother was still talking to her father, that Rachel had told her they hated each other. Then she asked Owen quietly to please just stop. He told her he couldn't. She hung up without saying goodbye. October 14th arrived, and Briar Hill Gardens looked exactly as it should have. White linens, string lights, flowers in simple glass vases, the terrace golden in the evening light. Everything that was supposed to be a reception was still there. Only the ceremony was gone. Owen arrived at 5:30. Dylan came with Kayla, the girl with dark hair and a shy smile he introduced as his date. Guests filed in. Owen's parents, his brother Matt, friends from work, college friends he hadn't seen in years, people he actually cared about. And then Bob Pewitt walked in alone, wearing a suit and carrying a bottle of bourbon. He shook Owen's hand firmly and said there was nowhere else he would be. Owen stood before dinner was served and thanked everyone simply for showing up, for reminding him that family is not just blood, but who stands beside you when things fall apart. His mother raised her glass. Bob stood and spoke about honor and raising children to keep their word, and apologized to Owen on behalf of his family. 3 hours later, driving home with gifts and whiskey and the hum of genuine conversation still in his chest, Owen felt something he hadn't expected to feel for a long time. Not victory, just warmth.
3 weeks after the dinner, Owen got a phone call from a man named Daniel Holloway, a private investigator who had been hired by Rachel's attorney to dig into Owen's finances. The goal had been to find leverage, something that could reduce what Rachel owed, some angle that might soften the judgment or reopen the property dispute. What Daniel found instead had nothing to do with Owen. He asked to meet at a coffee shop downtown, said there was something Owen had a right to know, and slid a folder across the table before he had finished his first sentence. Inside were bank statements Owen had never seen, text message logs that went back 2 years, and photographs. Daniel explained steadily. Rachel had a second bank account, completely separate, kept hidden throughout their entire relationship. It had been active for 4 years. The current balance was $217,000. Proceeds from an inheritance and the sale of a condo she had owned before they met. She had never disclosed it. Not during the relationship, not during the prenup negotiations, not in any of the legal proceedings. She had signed a document swearing full financial transparency and had quietly maintained a hidden fortune the entire time. But that was only the beginning. The text message logs showed an ongoing conversation between Rachel and Trevor that stretched back 2 full years, long before the Bachelorette party, long before anyone had suspected anything. They had never stopped seeing each other. The messages discussed meetups, timelines, and strategy. One exchange outlined a plan to stay the course through the wedding, allow Owen to continue building equity and savings, and then divorce him approximately 1 year after the ceremony, at which point Rachel would claim half his assets while the hidden account remained untouched. One message from Rachel read, "He's so trusting it's almost sad." Trevor's reply, "Just don't mess it up before the wedding. We're almost there."
Daniel explained that he was a licensed investigator with an ethical obligation to report criminal activity when he discovered it. What Rachel had done constituted marriage fraud. Owen had grounds not just for a civil case, but for a criminal complaint with the district attorney's office. The hidden account, the coordinated deception, the false financial disclosures, all of it pointed to a premeditated conspiracy. Owen took the folder home and called Stephen, who reviewed everything and told him without hesitation to file criminal charges. The DA's office would handle the fraud case. Stephen would handle civil recovery. Between the two, Rachel would not just lose money, she would lose her freedom. That night, Dylan found Owen in his office staring at the documents spread across his desk. Owen told him everything: the hidden account, the messages, the timeline Trevor and Rachel had built together. Dylan went quiet, then asked what Owen was going to do. Owen looked at his son and said he was going to make sure she faced consequences, not out of vindictiveness, but because what she had planned was criminal and people needed to answer for their crimes. He said the next man she targeted deserved to be protected too. Dylan asked if that meant she might go to jail. Owen said especially if it means that. Then he closed the folder and started making calls. The criminal trial ran for 14 months, from filing to verdict. Rachel was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, marriage fraud, and perjury. The evidence was overwhelming. The text messages, the hidden account, the financial disclosures she had signed and lied on, and testimony from Trevor Langley himself, who accepted a deal to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. When the verdict came in, Rachel was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of probation and full financial restitution. That meant the $43,000 she had stolen, the hidden account of $217,000, legal fees, and court costs, a total obligation of $263,000, with her wages to be garnished for the better part of a decade. Owen did not attend the sentencing. He sent Stephen in his place and waited at home for the call. When it came, Stephen delivered the numbers in his clean, efficient way. Owen thanked him, hung up, and sat for a long time in the quiet of his living room. He felt no triumph, no relief that arrived with fanfare, just the particular stillness that comes when something that has consumed your life for over a year finally stops moving. It was finished. He let himself sit in that silence for a while before he got up and made dinner. Dylan came home from his first year at UT Austin that weekend, studying computer science, doing well, dating Kayla seriously now. Over dinner he asked if Owen was okay, said he had seen the news about the sentencing. Owen told him it was over and that he was fine, actually fine, not the performance of fine. Dylan asked whether Owen ever regretted going as hard as he had. Owen thought about it honestly before he answered. He said no. Rachel hadn't just cheated on him. She had constructed a plan with a timeline and a target and had been executing it for nearly 2 years. If he had married her, he would have lost everything a second time. He had protected himself, and in doing so, he had probably protected someone else she would have done it to next. Emma reached out about 8 months after the trial ended. She was 15, living with Bob full-time. She sent an email saying she was sorry, that she hadn't understood what her mother had really been doing, that her grandfather had shown her some of the evidence. Owen wrote back and told her she had nothing to apologize for, that she was a good kid and that she should stay that way. He meant every word. He sold the townhouse. Too many echoes in the walls, too much weight in the floorboards. He bought a smaller place in a different neighborhood and started fresh in the most literal sense. New rooms, new light, new mornings without the residue of everything that had happened there. He started dating again eventually. Slowly, a woman named Sarah, a librarian with kind eyes and no appetite for drama. They took their time. One evening, he was sitting on his new back porch watching the sun go down when a message arrived from an unknown number. It said, "I'm out. I did my time. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry for everything. Rachel." Owen stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, "I hope you learned something. Don't contact me again." He blocked the number, set his phone on the armrest, and looked back at the sky. The sun was finishing its descent in shades of orange and purple, the kind of ending that looks like a beginning if you're in the right frame of mind. Somewhere in the city, Rachel was starting over with the weight of every choice she had made. Here, on this porch, in this house that was his and only his, Owen Hayes was free. And that, he knew, was worth every hard decision he had made to get there.